The small countryside station was busy that morning. People hurried with their bags, children tugged at their parents' hands, and the sound of announcements echoed across the platform. Among all those moving faces was a woman named Clara. She walked slowly, clutching a bag that seemed too heavy for her tired frame. Her clothes were wrinkled, and her face was pale. Every step looked like a struggle, but still, she pressed forward. Her eyes were fixed on the ground, avoiding the curious glances of strangers. Clara's hands trembled as she adjusted the strap of her bag. She hadn't eaten much in days, and her body ached all over. She tried to blend in, hoping no one would notice her bruises. Her arms carried faint marks, her knees felt weak, and her legs shook with the weight of her steps. It wasn't only her body that felt heavy, her heart carried the burden of fear and sorrow. She had left behind a life that had given her nothing but pain. The train station was supposed to be her escape, a place where she could disappear into a crowd and begin again somewhere far away. But her body betrayed her. As she tried to climb the steps leading to the platform, her vision blurred. The world tilted, and she staggered. For a moment, she thought she could steady herself, but her knees buckled. With a soft gasp, Clara collapsed to the ground. Her bag slipped from her shoulder and fell with a dull thud beside her. People noticed, but they did not stop. Some slowed down to stare, then kept walking. Others whispered, assuming she was just tired or perhaps someone with problems they didn't want to get involved in. A few glanced her way and quickly turned back to their phones or tickets. Clara lay there, half conscious, her chest rising and falling unevenly. The sound of rushing footsteps and the clatter of luggage wheels drowned out her faint attempt to call for help. And then, through the crowd, someone noticed her. A tall man wearing a weathered cowboy hat and dusty boots stepped forward. His name was Ethan. He had just arrived at the station after traveling into town for supplies. Unlike others who walked past, he didn't ignore the fallen woman. His sharp eyes, trained from years of ranch life, quickly understood she wasn't simply resting, she was in trouble. Without hesitation, Ethan pushed through the crowd and knelt beside her. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" he asked, his voice calm yet urgent. Clara blinked weakly, unable to form words. Ethan touched her wrist, checking for her pulse, and felt the faint, unsteady rhythm. She was alive, but barely holding on. He glanced around, but no one came forward to help. The faces of strangers avoided his gaze, pretending they hadn't seen. With a firm jaw, Ethan slid his arms under Clara and lifted her gently. She was light, far too light for a grown woman. Her head rested against his chest as he carried her away from the crowd. Ethan walked toward a shaded bench on the side of the platform. Each step he took drew the attention of onlookers, but he ignored their whispers. He placed Clara carefully on the bench and tilted his hat to shield her face from the sun. Her breathing was shallow, her lips dry. Ethan reached into his satchel and pulled out a flask of water, holding it near her mouth. "Easy now," he said softly as he helped her sip. Clara coughed at first but managed to swallow a little. Her eyelids fluttered open, and she looked at him in confusion. Why are you helping me?" she whispered in a weak voice. Ethan leaned closer, his expression steady. "Because you need it," he replied simply. For a moment, Clara tried to sit up, embarrassed at her state, but the pain in her body forced her back against the bench. She turned her face away, ashamed of her bruises being seen. Ethan noticed but didn't ask questions right away. Instead, he adjusted his coat, draping it lightly over her shoulders to keep her warm. "Rest here," he said gently. "You're safe." Clara swallowed hard. She wanted to say something, to explain why she was there, but the words stuck in her throat. All she managed was a faint, "I don't want to cause trouble." "You're not causing trouble," Ethan replied. His tone was firm, the kind of tone that left no room for doubt. People need a hand sometimes. That's all this is. For the first time that morning, Clara felt a small sense of relief. No one else had stopped, no one else had cared enough to notice, but this stranger, a cowboy with dust on his boots and kindness in his eyes, had lifted her up when she was too bruised to stand around him. The station carried on. Trains arrived and departed, people bustled past, and announcements echoed through the air. But for Clara, the noise faded into the background. All she could focus on was the stranger who had stopped when everyone else had walked away. His presence was steady, his voice calm, and his actions spoke louder than any words. Minutes stretched into what felt like an hour as Clara regained a little strength. Her breathing steadied, though her body still trembled. Ethan stayed beside her, patient, watchful, as though nothing else mattered until she was all right. Clara, though still too weak to explain her story, began to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. She closed her eyes, the image of his weathered hat and steady hands lingering in her mind. At that moment, she didn't know who he truly was, or what role he would play in her life. But deep inside, she sensed that collapsing at the station had not been the end of her journey, it was the beginning of something that might change everything. Clara sat quietly on the wooden bench at the edge of the station, her body still aching but her breathing calmer than before. The cowboy, Ethan, stayed by her side, his hat tilted low as he kept watch. The sun hung high in the sky, and the noise of trains clattering in and out mixed with the voices of people rushing past. Yet for Clara, all of that faded. What stood out was the stranger who had chosen to stop, when everyone else had walked by without care. Ethan held the flask in his hand and gently encouraged her to take another sip. "Go slow," he said. "You've been without water too long." Clara obeyed, her hands trembling as she steadied the flask. Each drop refreshed her dry throat, though she felt embarrassed to be so helpless. She wanted to thank him properly, but her voice faltered. Instead, she whispered, "You should leave me here. I'll be fine." Ethan gave her a look that was both firm and kind. "I don't leave folks behind when they're hurting," he answered simply. "You collapsed right in front of me. That means I'm not walking away." His words carried a weight she couldn't argue with. Clara lowered her eyes, ashamed of her weakness. She adjusted the coat he had draped over her shoulders and pulled it closer. It was warm and smelled faintly of leather and dust, the kind of scent that reminded her of open fields she had once dreamed about but never lived near. Minutes passed in silence, broken only when Ethan spoke again. "Those bruises," he said softly, not prying but not ignoring either. "You didn't get them from a simple fall." Clara stiffened. She turned her face away, as though the ground might swallow her whole. "It doesn't matter," she muttered. "I'll heal." Ethan didn't push further. He leaned back on the bench, letting her hold her silence. He had learned long ago that some wounds were too deep to be forced open. People would speak when they were ready. His job was to let them know they weren't alone in the meantime. Instead, he changed the subject, pointing to the tracks. "I came here for supplies. My ranch is a few towns over," he said. "Cattle, horses, open skies. That's home." His voice carried pride, but also calm, as though he were painting a picture of peace without even trying. Clara listened despite herself. His words stirred something inside her. A ranch sounded like the kind of place where time moved slower, where a person could breathe without fear. She had never been near such a life. Her world had been noise, pressure, and cruelty. "You live there alone?" she asked quietly, almost surprising herself by speaking. "Not alone," Ethan replied. "I've got hands working with me. A few neighbors near enough to share meals and lend help when it's needed. It's not crowded, but it's not empty either. Feels just right." The way he spoke made Clara's chest ache. She longed for something that felt just right. But her reality had been anything but that. She stayed quiet again, afraid of saying too much. Ethan noticed her hesitation, so he shifted slightly closer. "Look, I don't need the whole story," he said gently. "But I can see you're running from something. And whatever it is, it left you hurting." His eyes softened. "You don't need to be alone with it right now." Clara's throat tightened. She wanted to trust him, but years of pain had built walls around her heart. Still, something about Ethan's presence chipped away at those walls. He wasn't pressing her with pity or asking for details she couldn't share yet. He was simply there, steady and unshakable. The station grew busier as the afternoon rolled on. Trains whistled, children laughed, and vendors shouted about food for sale. Ethan went to a stall and bought a small loaf of bread. He returned and tore it in half, handing one piece to Clara. "You need to eat," he said plainly. Clara hesitated, but hunger gnawed at her. She took the bread with both hands, nibbling slowly. The taste of simple, warm bread felt like a blessing after days of little food. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice steadier now. "You don't owe me thanks," Ethan replied. "Just eat, get your strength back." Clara studied him as she chewed. He looked like a man who had seen hard work. His hands were rough, his skin sun-worn, but there was nothing harsh in his manner. She wondered why someone like him had stopped for her when so many others hadn't even paused. After she finished, Clara leaned back, tired but no longer dizzy. Ethan adjusted the hat on his head and looked around. "You got somewhere you're headed?" he asked. Clara froze. She hadn't thought that far. She had boarded a train just to get away, not knowing what awaited her on the other side. Now, sitting here with her bruises aching and her body weak, she realized she had nowhere to go. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I just wanted to get away." Ethan nodded slowly. He didn't look shocked, nor did he judge her. "Sometimes leaving is the only choice a person has," he said. "But leaving's just the first step. After that, you need a place to land." His words sank deep. Clara's chest tightened with both fear and longing. She didn't know what she had expected, perhaps to vanish into the world unnoticed. But this cowboy was looking at her as though she mattered, as though she wasn't invisible. "You don't have to figure it all out today," Ethan added gently. "Right now, what you need is to breathe and heal. The rest can wait." Clara felt tears sting her eyes, but she quickly blinked them away. She didn't want him to see her cry. Yet, despite her effort, one tear slipped down her cheek. Ethan didn't comment, didn't make her feel weak. He simply handed her his handkerchief. For the first time in years, Clara let herself breathe without the weight of fear pressing on her chest. She was still hurting, still uncertain of the future, but sitting beside Ethan, she felt safe. It was a small feeling, fragile but real. As the afternoon sun dipped lower, casting golden light across the tracks, Clara realized something important. She had collapsed at that station because her body could not carry the weight of her pain any longer. But perhaps fate had led her to fall right where Ethan would see her. Perhaps her collapse was not an ending, but the beginning of a rescue she never expected. Ethan stood and looked down at her with calm assurance. "You're not alone anymore," he said. Those words lingered in Clara's heart long after the noise of the station quieted. For the first time, she dared to believe they might be true. Clara sat with Ethan long after the trains had come and gone, her body still sore but her heart calmer than it had been in years. The bench beneath her was hard, and the sounds of the station carried on, yet she felt strangely safe for the first time. Ethan stayed near, not rushing her, not demanding answers, simply giving her space. His silence was not heavy, it was steady, like the quiet strength of a man who had learned patience from the land he worked on. Finally, as evening shadows stretched across the platform, Clara spoke. Her voice was soft, almost trembling, as though each word had to break through walls she had built around her heart. "You're right," she whispered. I didn't get these bruises from a fall. Ethan didn't react with surprise or pity. He only nodded slightly, encouraging her to continue if she wished. His calmness gave her courage. She looked down at her hands, twisting the handkerchief he had given her earlier, and slowly let her story unfold. I had a life that looked fine to others, she said. A small house, a routine, a smile that I wore for people so they wouldn't ask questions. But behind closed doors, it was different. Every day was filled with words that cut deeper than knives, actions that left marks on my skin and on my spirit. I kept thinking it would change, that if I just tried harder, things would be better. But it never was. Her voice cracked, and she stopped, pressing the cloth to her face. Ethan sat still, his gaze fixed on her, but his expression held no judgment. Instead, it carried quiet respect for her courage to share even a fraction of her truth. I stayed longer than I should have, she admitted. I was afraid. Afraid of what people would think, afraid of having nowhere to go, afraid of starting again with nothing. But the fear of staying finally became worse than the fear of leaving. So I packed what little I could and walked out the door. Ethan leaned forward slightly. That took strength, he said gently. Clara shook her head. It didn't feel like strength. It felt like desperation. I got on the first train I could, not even caring where it went. I just knew I had to run. I thought if I could get far enough away, maybe I could find peace. But when I stepped off at the station, my body gave out before my mind could decide the next step. And that's when you found me. She looked at him then, her eyes filled with a mixture of shame and relief. I didn't want anyone to see me like that. Weak. Broken. Ethan's voice was steady, his words carrying the weight of truth. Needing help doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. And broken doesn't mean finished. Sometimes, it's just the start of putting the pieces back together. Clara blinked back tears, his words sinking deeper than he knew. She had been told for so long that she was worthless, that no one would care if she vanished. Yet here was a man she had never met, sitting beside her, showing her more kindness in a single day than she had received in years. To ease her trembling heart, Ethan began to share a little of his own past. I grew up on a ranch not far from here, he said, his tone steady as the rhythm of hooves on dry earth. Life was simple but hard. My father taught me that a man's worth wasn't in how much he owned but in how he treated others. He used to say, you can't mend every fence, but you can help your neighbor fix theirs. That's how I was raised. Clara listened closely. His words painted a picture of wide open skies, fields of grass swaying in the wind, and a community where people looked after one another. It sounded like another world compared to the cold loneliness she had known. Ethan leaned back, his eyes softening as he looked at her. I've seen storms tear roofs off barns and droughts that crack the land. But the worst storms aren't always outside. Sometimes, they're the ones people carry inside themselves. That's why I don't walk past when someone's hurting. My father wouldn't have. Neither will I. Clara's throat tightened again, but this time the tears that filled her eyes weren't just from pain. They were from gratitude. For the first time, she felt she wasn't being judged for her past but understood for her survival. They sat there until the lamps at the station flickered on, casting a soft glow across the benches. Clara hugged Ethan's coat tighter around her shoulders, drawing comfort from its warmth. Do you ever get tired of helping people? She asked softly. Ethan chuckled gently. No. You don't get tired of doing what's right. You might get worn from the work, but not from the reason behind it. Besides, one day I might need a hand myself. That's how life goes, we carry each other when one of us falls. Those words wrapped around Clara's heart like a blanket. She had carried her pain alone for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to be supported. The night air grew cooler, and the sound of another train arriving filled the platform. Clara looked at the train cars, their windows glowing, and felt the pull of her old plan to vanish, to disappear into the unknown. But for the first time, she hesitated. Ethan noticed her glance and asked, "Thinking of leaving?" She nodded slowly. "That was my plan. But now, I don't know where I'd even go." Ethan studied her for a long moment before speaking. "Sometimes running isn't the answer. Sometimes, you need to stop and let yourself heal before you can move forward. You've been running on empty, Clara. You need a place where you can breathe again." His words rang true. She realized she didn't need another train to take her farther away. What she needed was a safe place to rest, to find her strength again. And sitting beside this cowboy, she felt that possibility for the first time. Clara leaned her head back against the bench, closing her eyes as tears slid silently down her cheeks. They were not tears of despair this time, but of release. Ethan didn't reach out to stop them, didn't tell her to be strong. He simply sat with her in the quiet, his presence reminding her that she was not invisible, not forgotten. As the station quieted for the night, Clara realized something had shifted inside her. Sharing her hidden past had not broken her, it had lifted a weight she had carried for far too long. And Ethan's steady care had planted a fragile seed of hope. She still had scars, both inside and out, but now she believed healing was possible. And though she didn't know what the next step would look like, she sensed that this cowboy, who had found her collapsed and too bruised to stand, might be part of the path that would change everything. The night air grew cooler, and Clara wrapped Ethan's coat tighter around herself. The station lamps cast long shadows on the ground, and the noise of travelers slowly faded as the last trains came and went. Clara's body ached, her heart was weary, but her spirit felt lighter after speaking about her past. Ethan sat quietly beside her, giving her space, yet his presence felt like a shield between her and the world. When the platform finally emptied, Ethan looked at her carefully. "You can't stay here all night," he said softly. "The station will close, and the cold will set in. You need a safe place to rest." Clara's first thought was to protest. She didn't want to be a burden, didn't want to accept more kindness than she deserved. But her body was weak, her options few. "Where would I even go?" she asked in a trembling voice. Ethan's eyes were steady, calm, like the stillness of a field under the stars. "Come with me," he said. "I've got room at the ranch. A bed. Food. Folks who won't ask you for more than you can give. Just rest there, and decide what's next when you're ready." Clara's chest tightened. She wasn't used to offers like that. Too often, help had come with strings attached, with hidden costs. She searched his face for any sign of deception, but all she saw was sincerity. His voice carried no pressure, only quiet assurance. "You'd do that for me," she whispered. "I already am," Ethan replied simply. "You collapsed at my feet. That makes it my responsibility to see you through." His words stirred a mixture of fear and hope inside her. A part of her wanted to run, to keep hiding. But another part, the tired, lonely part, longed for safety, for a chance to breathe without fear. After a moment, she nodded faintly. Ethan helped her to her feet. She wobbled, her knees weak, but his steady arm guided her. They walked slowly out of the station, past the flickering lamps and the distant glow of the town. Ethan's truck waited near the lot, its paint scratched and its bed filled with supplies. He opened the passenger door gently, helping Clara climb in as though she were something fragile. The drive stretched across quiet roads that wound through open fields. The moon rose high, silver light bathing the land. Clara leaned her head against the window, her eyes half closed, but she couldn't stop stealing glances at Ethan. His hands rested firm on the wheel, his posture relaxed yet alert. There was something grounding about the way he drove, as if the land itself trusted him. They arrived at the ranch long after the town had fallen asleep. The wooden gate creaked as Ethan pulled it open and drove through. Beyond stretched wide pastures, a barn, and a farmhouse with warm light glowing in its windows. The smell of hay and earth carried on the night breeze. Clara's heart fluttered with both fear and wonder. She had never stepped onto land like this, open, free, untouched by the cold walls of her old life. Ethan parked the truck and walked her inside. The farmhouse was simple but welcoming, its wooden floors creaking gently, the air filled with the scent of freshly baked bread. "Make yourself at home," Ethan said as he set down his hat. He guided her to a small room with a bed neatly made, a quilt folded at the edge. "You'll sleep here tonight. Rest. No one will disturb you." Clara touched the quilt with trembling fingers. It had been years since she'd slept in a place that felt truly safe. She looked at him, her eyes uncertain. "Why are you doing this?" Ethan leaned against the doorframe, his expression calm. "Because it's right," he said. "Because you need it. And because I can." Those words silenced her doubts. For the first time in years, she slipped under clean blankets and let herself rest. The farmhouse was quiet, the distant sound of crickets lulling her to sleep. The days that followed brought new life into Clara's world. Ethan introduced her to the ranch slowly, never pushing, always giving her space. At first, she stayed indoors, helping with small tasks like folding laundry or preparing simple meals. But the fresh air called to her, and soon she found herself standing outside, watching horses run freely across the pasture. Ethan showed her the stables, the chickens pecking near the fence, the garden where vegetables grew in neat rows. "This place runs on trust," he explained. "Every hand does their part, every soul is welcome." Clara listened, unsure at first, but gradually curiosity drew her in. She learned how to scatter feed for the hens, how to brush a horse's coat, how to carry water without spilling. Her body ached, but in a different way, a healthy ache, born from work instead of fear. Each day, she felt pieces of herself returning. The bruises on her skin faded, replaced by the flush of sun on her cheeks. The heaviness in her heart lifted, little by little, as she laughed quietly at the clumsy chickens or smiled at the gentle nudge of a horse's nose. The ranch hands welcomed her without question. They didn't ask about her past, they simply treated her as one of their own. Clara marveled at their acceptance. She had expected whispers, judgment, suspicion, but instead she found kindness, as though she had always belonged. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in gold and pink, Clara sat on the porch with Ethan. She watched the horizon with quiet wonder. "I never thought I'd see a place like this," she admitted. "It feels like freedom." Ethan glanced at her, his eyes soft. "That's what it is. Freedom. And it's yours as much as mine." Clara turned to him, her heart swelling with gratitude she could hardly put into words. For so long, she had believed she was nothing more than a shadow, unseen and unwanted. But here, under the open sky, she was learning to stand again, not just on her feet, but in her spirit. The ranch had become more than a shelter. It was a chance to begin again. Each morning, the sound of roosters and the scent of hay greeted her. Each night, the stars stretched endlessly above, reminding her that the world was larger than her pain. Clara knew she still had a long road ahead. Healing would not come overnight. But she also knew she was no longer walking that road alone. Ethan's quiet strength, his patience, his belief in her worth, these things had given her the courage to imagine a different future. As she looked across the fields that evening, Clara whispered to herself, "Maybe I can belong here. Maybe I can live again." And in her heart, she knew that this was only the beginning of a new path, one that opened the moment a cowboy chose to stop at a crowded station and offer her kindness when she needed it most. Clara woke to the gentle warmth of sunlight spilling through the window. The morning air carried the scent of fresh hay and dew-covered grass. For the first time in years, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: peace. She stretched slowly, her body still tender from the work of the past days, but there was no ache of fear, no heaviness in her chest. Just a quiet, calm sense of being alive. She dressed quickly and stepped outside, drawn to the wide open fields. The sky was painted in soft oranges and blues, the horizon stretching endlessly. Horses grazed in the distance, their tails swishing lazily in the breeze. Birds sang cheerfully from the trees, their melodies filling the air. Clara inhaled deeply, feeling the fresh country air fill her lungs, washing away memories that had haunted her for so long. Ethan was already outside, tending to the morning chores. He lifted his hat in greeting, a small smile on his weathered face. "Morning," he said simply, as if the day had already begun perfectly. "Morning," Clara replied, her voice quiet but steady. She felt a newfound confidence rising within her, a sense that she was part of this world now, not just a visitor. She walked over and joined him. Together, they fed the chickens, carried water to the garden, and checked on the horses. Ethan taught her gently, patiently, never rushing, always letting her learn at her own pace. Each task she completed, no matter how small, gave her a sense of accomplishment she had never known before. As the morning passed, Clara realized how much she had grown in just a few days. The bruises on her body were gone, but more importantly, the bruises on her spirit were healing. She laughed freely as a young foal stumbled clumsily in the pasture, her laughter ringing clear and bright. The ranch felt alive, and she felt alive too. By midday, the sun was high and warm, and the two of them took a break on the porch. Ethan handed her a glass of iced tea, and they watched the world around them. Clara's thoughts drifted to the people she had left behind, the life she had run from. But she no longer felt the same fear or shame. Instead, there was clarity. She had survived, she had endured, and now she had the chance to rebuild. "I never thought a place like this existed," Clara said softly. "I never believed people could be this kind." Ethan shrugged, a small, modest gesture. "People can surprise you. Sometimes you just have to find the right ones." Clara smiled, feeling warmth spread through her chest. She had found more than kindness, she had found understanding, patience, and the courage to believe in herself again. Each day on the ranch was teaching her not just to survive, but to truly live. In the weeks that followed, Clara became an integral part of the ranch. She learned to ride horses properly, her confidence growing with each passing day. She helped in the fields, planting vegetables and tending to the animals. Her hands, once weak and trembling, became strong and capable. She discovered a rhythm in her life here, one that brought her both joy and purpose. Ethan watched her quietly, proud of her progress but never boastful. He respected her space, giving her the freedom to grow at her own pace. Sometimes, they would sit together in silence, watching the sunset, the world painted in shades of gold and crimson. In those quiet moments, Clara felt a deep connection not just to Ethan, but to the land, to the life she was building. One evening, as the sky darkened and stars began to twinkle, Ethan brought a lantern and guided Clara to a small hill overlooking the ranch. The view stretched for miles, fields and forests bathed in silver moonlight. Clara stood in awe, her heart swelling with gratitude and wonder. "This is beautiful," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. Ethan nodded, standing beside her. "It's yours too," he said softly. "This is your home now, if you want it." Clara turned to him, her eyes shining. She thought of the station where she had collapsed, the dark moments she had endured, and the fear that had once consumed her. And now, here she was stronger, safer, and free to live the life she had always dreamed of. "Yes," she said firmly, a smile spreading across her face. "I want this. I want to stay." Ethan smiled, a quiet, content expression. "Then you're welcome," he said simply. From that night on, Clara's life on the ranch blossomed. She woke each day to the sun, the sound of animals, and the promise of new beginnings. She found joy in simple things: feeding chickens, watching horses run, planting seeds and seeing them grow. Each day brought new lessons, new experiences, and new reasons to hope. She also began to open her heart in ways she had never done before. She laughed freely with the ranch hands, shared stories of her past when she felt ready, and learned to trust the kindness of others. She no longer feared the world, she embraced it, finding strength in the community that had welcomed her without question. Ethan and Clara grew close, their bond deepening naturally, built on trust, respect, and shared experiences. They didn't rush, they simply lived, letting life guide their connection. Ethan admired her courage, her determination to heal, and Clara found comfort in his steady presence, his quiet strength a constant reassurance. As the seasons changed, Clara felt a sense of completeness she had never known. The ranch was more than a home, it was a sanctuary, a place where she could be herself, unafraid and unashamed. She looked at the horizon each morning with hope, and at night, she fell asleep feeling safe, loved, and ready for whatever the next day would bring. Her past no longer defined her, it had shaped her, yes, but it could not hold her back. Clara had survived the darkness, and now she thrived in the light. Every sunrise, every breeze, every laugh, and every quiet moment on the ranch reminded her that life could be beautiful, that second chances were real, and that trust and kindness could heal even the deepest wounds. And so, in the gentle rhythm of ranch life, Clara discovered the freedom she had longed for. She stood tall, not just physically, but in spirit, knowing that she was no longer just surviving, she was truly living. The station where she had fallen seemed like a distant memory, replaced by the warmth of a home, the comfort of friendship, and the quiet, steadfast presence of a cowboy who had rescued her not just from the streets, but from fear itself. Clara finally realized that rescue was not only about saving someone from danger, it was about giving them hope, giving them trust, giving them the chance to rise again. And on that ranch, under open skies and endless stars, she rose. Her life, once broken and bruised, was whole again. And for the first time, Clara smiled not out of relief, but out of joy, knowing that the journey she had endured had led her to exactly where she was meant to be. The past remained a chapter, the station a distant memory, and the future stretched wide before her, full of possibility, full of life, full of hope. And every day, as the sun rose over the fields and the horses ran free, Clara whispered a quiet thanks not just to Ethan, the cowboy who had rescued her, but to life itself, for giving her the chance to stand, to heal, and to love the world once more.